Hello and welcome to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and today we are toppling tuplets again. We're going to start looking at tuplet definitions, and this is going to be a two-part series, so this will be part one. Now, before I get too deep into the actual design and tuplet definition dialog box, I do want to talk about the fact that there are three different places that you can change the design of your tuplets, and it's kind of important to understand what they do individually, but also how they sort of interact with each other. So before we get too deep into it, I just want to show you where they are, how to get there, and give you a general rundown of it. So we know that we can get to the tuplet definition individually by clicking on the first node of any tuplet, double-clicking on the handle. We can also get there by right-clicking on the handle, edit tuplet definition. We can also get there if the handle is selected. You could actually just press return, and it will pull that up as well. All right. Now, this tuplet definition dialog box is going to only apply to that one individual tuplet that you just selected. All right. So that's essentially what that is going to do. The second place where you can find a similar dialog box is in the document options under the tuplets pane, and you'll see a very similar looking dialog box with almost the same exact options except for a few down at the bottom which are unique. Now, the thing to know about the document options version of this is that any changes that you make to the top portion of this, from where my mouse is upwards, will only apply to tuplets that you create after you've made the change. So if you make changes in here, it's not going to affect tuplets that already exist in the file. All right, so that's important to understand. You can make changes in here and nothing will happen to your current tuplets. All right, with the exception of the bottom portion of this dialog box where we have horizontal number offset, bracket thickness, and maximum slope. All right. And while I'm here, I just want to show you those few options just so we can get those, so I can show you what those are. So with the horizontal number offset, it's going to change where the number is in relation to the bracket. And so it's currently set to 0.03472 in the up stem and negative 0.03472 in the down stem. And if I change this a little bit to a higher number, actually make this 0.1, you'll see that the number will move to the right a little bit, so it's a little bit off center now, right? And bracket thickness is exactly what that you would think that is. It's just the thickness of the line of the bracket. Currently, it's set to 0.765, right? We can make that a little thicker if we want. Let's make it 0.05. And you see that it's ridiculously thick, but we can change that back, 0.00765. And that'll go back to normal. All right. And then finally, maximum slope. Now, this will affect the actual angle of the tuplet, and you can see that I've got some angled tuplets here. And in the case of the 7 tuplet here, it's not quite lining up with the angle of the notes here, but we can actually increase the maximum slope. We can change this to 15, and you'll see that the slope of these will actually get a little steeper. Right, and we get to 20. When you start getting too steep, though, it does screw up the placement of the number, so you'd have to make some other change in the positioning to fix that. But generally 10, 12, somewhere around there is going to be a good number. You don't necessarily want to have super steep tuplets all the time anyway. All right, so again, just with the document options, it's just these bottom options are going to change tuplets retroactively. Everything else is only going to change things going forward. All right, so that's the second place you can change tuplets. And the third place, if we actually make a selection of music, we can go to Utilities, Change, and choose, there we go, Tuplets. And we'll get a very similar looking dialog box with a few differences. All right. Now, I wanted to show you how these compare to each other, but I can't actually pull all 3 windows up at once in the program. So I very handily made some screenshots for you. So I'm going to pull those over right now. Give me a second here. So we've got the individual tuplet definition dialog box here. We've got the document options here, and we've got the utilities change tuplet options here. All right. So I talked a bunch about the document options, and like I said, it's just important to know that most of the changes will only affect tuplets going forward. In the individual tuplet definition dialog box, there's a few things that don't exist in the document options. First of all, the actual definition of the tuplet itself, 3/4 in the space of 2/4, as I have this one set right now. That actually does exist in the change tuplets as well. You could change that core definition of the tuplets on a big scale, but that seems dangerous to me because you could select a whole bunch of measures that have different types of tuplets and change that and change them all to the same thing, and it could cause a mess. So I'll probably stay away from that part of the change tuplets definition. But anyway, in the individual tuplet definition, aside from that, we have an option down here that's unique to this box called Set Default. So if you open up this tuplet definition for an individual tuplet and make changes to any of these numbers or values or pull-down menus, before you click OK, if you were to click Set Default, what would happen is that whatever you have set here would all of a sudden become set as your document options, right? So this is a way to actually set your document options right from an individual triplet or tuplet and make that the tuplet definition going forward. All right, so that option exists there. There's also a reset button, and what this reset will do is no matter what changes you make here, if you make a bunch of changes and you decide that's not right, when you press reset, it will reset the values, all of them, to the values that exist in the document options, right? So whatever's here, press reset, it goes back to this. The reset also exists in the utilities change tuplets menu. And in this case, when you press reset and you have a whole bunch of measures selected, it'll reset the all of those tuplets back to the original default document options version. All right. So that's sort of how they, where these windows are and how they interact with each other. So that's important to know. There's one other major thing I want to talk about with the utilities change tuplets. And actually, let me just pull this up live in the program so I can manipulate this a little bit with you. So go to change tuplets. And the major difference here that you'll notice is there's all these things that say no change, no change, no change in these pull-down menus, and a lot of the boxes have minus signs. Just so you know what this is, when you have no change selected, it doesn't matter what state, in this case the placement is, of any of those individual tuplets. In fact, they could all be different. They could all have different placement states. If you have no change selected and whatever other changes you make here, press OK, that will not change the placement, even if they're all different, right? If you were to change this to stem beam side, for example, it doesn't matter what the state of the placement is in all of those tuplets that you're selecting, it will change them all to stem beam side, all right? So that's how that works. Same thing with number and shape and everything. And it's sort of similar with these minus signs. Now in these check boxes in the change tuplets, we have three options now. We have minus, check, and empty, right? The minus just means that there's no change in the enhanced tuplets in this case. So whatever state the enhanced tuplets are in all of the tuplets, if I have it set to minus, it will not change those. If I set it to checked, it doesn't matter what state they're in, they will all have enhanced tuplets checked. If I uncheck it, again, it doesn't matter what state these tuplets are in regards to enhanced tuplet. With it unchecked and I hit OK, they will all have enhanced tuplets turned off. All right, so that's how that works. And we also have that option here. We have a no change option under the appearance because these three options right here always use specified shape, never bracket beam notes on beam side, and bracket unbeam notes only. You can only have one of those three options checked, and so no change will again make no change to the state of whatever one of those three options are set. All right. And then as far as the positioning values, if these boxes are empty, then essentially there's no change being made. If you set any number in any one of these boxes, it will set the it will change that value for all of the tuplets that you have selected. All right, so that is just how that works. So let's look at the actual tuplet definition and design itself. All right. And we'll start with an individual tuplet here. I just checked on that first one. And so we'll start with placement. Now, I talked about placement a lot in video 11.1, and you can go back to that video to have a refresher on all of these options here. But let's look a little bit below that, what we have here. Now, enhanced tuplets. Now, I feel like this was an option that Finale added several years ago, many versions ago. It essentially changes the algorithm that Finale uses to place the tuplet in regards to rests and stems and beam sides and everything. You know, all this to say is that you should probably have this checked. The reason why it exists is probably in case somebody has an old file that they convert to a newer version of Finale, and they didn't have the enhanced tuplets, and when they turn the enhanced tuplets on, it changes their manual positioning, yada yada yada. So it's probably why this is even an option to begin with. I do know that another thing that it does is in the case of stem beam side, a tuplet using enhanced tuplet would take the side where the majority of the stems are. So if you had two stems going down and one stem going up, the tuplet would go below. With this checked, with this unchecked, Finale used to do it so that if the first note was stem down and the next two were stem up, the tuplet would go below, which is not the majority. It's actually where the first stem is, right? So there's a slight difference between how it handled tuplets back then. Suffice it to say, leave this checked. There's probably no reason to have it unchecked, all right? And interestingly, Finale calls this enhanced tuplet in this dialog box, but in the document options, they call it engraver tuplets. It's the same exact thing. Seems a little inconsistency in the program there, but so be it. And then avoid staff lines is sort of exactly what you think it would be. In this case, in the second line here, you see I have these triplets that are avoiding the staff dutifully, and that might not be what you want, so you could always change that. Uncheck the avoid staff, and you'll see that that tuplet then gets put in the staff closer to the stem or the beam. It's an option for you if you would prefer to see them inside in that case. Allow horizontal drag. Now, by default, this will be unchecked, which is probably good because generally speaking, you don't want to move your triplets or your tuplets left and right, but you could if you check that. And you'll see that now I can move the entire tuplet left and right. And actually, when I have this selected, we could move the number itself left or right. With that checked, you can't even move the number like that either. So. All right, so that's allow horizontal drag. Generally, I think it's better to have that unchecked. And then finally, use bottom note. Again, I think this is a vestigial function in Finale, and I was playing around with this the other day, and I couldn't really figure out the value of having this checked or unchecked. So I'm just going to read you what it says in the Finale manual, and you can decide for yourself. Use bottom note. If the first note in the tuplet group is a chord, the numbers in the position text boxes, that's all this down here, are generally measured from the top note. If you transpose that note up or down, the entire tuplet moves with it. Select this option, however, if you want these numbers measured from the bottom note instead. And again, I had this checked, and I was working with chords and triplets, and it didn't seem to have much of an effect at all. So again, it's suffice it to say that I wouldn't worry too much about that option. All right. And then let's take a look at appearance. Now we can have a few different options for the number of our tuplet, and number will be the actual setting by default, but you could choose nothing, and you'll see that the number would go away. You can also choose XY, which will give you a ratio. Let me just zoom in here a little bit more so you can see that better. You got a ratio there now. We could choose XYQ, which will give you a ratio with a rhythmic value at the end of the second note, or XQYQ will give you rhythmic values at in both numbers. And this could be handy if you've got some like really complex tuplets where you've got like, I don't know, like 7/8 notes in the space of 2 quarter notes, and you want to show exactly that. You could do that. But by default, number will be selected. And below number, we have shape, and by default, bracket is selected, and we have the option of having no shape, nothing, and you'll see the bracket go away. Or we have the option of bracket, or we have the option of slur if you want to see that slur type of triplet. And incidentally, when you have the slur selected, these end handles will actually change the value of the curve. It'll change the curvature of that slur for you, all right? And again, we could just reset these to go back to normal. And then below the number and shape, we have a few options here. Break, slur, or bracket. If we uncheck that, you'll see what happens right away, that the bracket itself will get drawn right through the number. Now this could be handy if you wanted to do triplets without a number. Just choose nothing with that unchecked, and you can see that you'll get just a bracket. Or if you do have a number with that unchecked, you could actually move this number, and this you can set in the positioning as well, but I just did that manually by moving it, so you can get something like that. Or Maybe perhaps if you wanted that slur, that might look good too. Something along those lines. Get a triplet that looks something like that. All right. So there's a few different options for the bracket and the number there. Let's go reset. All right. And then finally below that, let's look at these options for always use specified shape, never bracket beamed notes on beam side, and bracket unbeamed notes only. That's a tongue twister. The second option will be selected by default, and this is what's going to allow Finale to put the triplet in this case on the beam side without the bracket. However, if we select always use specified shape, it will always use the bracket, regardless if it's on the beam side or the note side, and you can see that it just did just that. And if we have this second option checked, by the way, which is the normal way, and we flip this triplet to the note side, you'll see that the bracket will appear. So that the tuplet without the bracket will only appear on the beam side if the entire tuplet is beamed, right? And finally, we have the option of bracket unbeamed notes only, which means that if I were to flip this triplet now, you'll see that the bracket goes away. That's basically what that will allow you to do. Again, if the entire tuplet is beamed, it will not bracket it no matter what, whether it's on the note side or the beam side. That's the difference between those two options. I think that makes sense. I think I explained that well. All right, so that's placement and appearance, and I'm going to talk about positioning in part 2. So we'll leave it at that for now. So come back and we'll talk about the tuplet definition positioning next. All right, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.